Hi, Wellspring.
Hello.
Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Pastor Jerry and Pastor Dawn. Today, we're going to talk about four questions to think about for our spiritual life for reentry. The first question has two parts. It's what did I learn about how I use my time, and what does it say about my priorities? The second question is how were my relationships impacted? The third question is when it comes to kingdom activity, how will you be more intentional? And the last question is what about your spiritual disciplines?
Okay, so Dawn mentioned reentry, and my daughter JL lived overseas for a couple long stretches. And as she prepared to come back to the United States, she would have to think about reentry because there would be cultural shifts and language shifts, and just daily activities would be a little bit different than where she had been. And so she would have to be intentional about how am I going to respond to reentering American culture, United States culture. So that's what we're talking about. What is it like to re-enter after we've been through this particular season? So, Dawn, I'll just start by asking you question one. What did you learn about how you use your time and how you prioritize things?
So I learned that I really wasn't as busy as what I thought I was. I know that I would use the excuse, or in my mind, I would think, I'm too busy to swing by and visit my parents after work, or I'm too busy to have lunch with friends, or I'm just too busy. We get caught up in our everyday life, and, we have all these things that we have to do on our checklist, and extra things become burdensome, and we think, oh, we don't have time for that. So I've learned really that I'm really not as busy as I thought I was before.
So, just kind of recognizing that the things that are really important to us, we can make time for them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, if we choose to.
Right.
Like it's a choice that I have to be intentional about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jerry, how were your relationships impacted?
Yeah, so in thinking about this question, two things really come to my mind. And first is that we've been through some transition here on our staff during this time. Both Josiah and Julia have been fully integrated into our team, and we had to be very intentional about that. We had to sit down and talk through how we're going to structure our week, how we're going to structure our staff meetings, how we're going to divide the workload, and what are the ways that we can use each person's strengths and weaknesses. So we really had to talk through that and be very intentional about how to connect with one another. And I think probably in my home life, the biggest thing that's been a gift to us during this season is that we've done family dinner together a lot more. And I grew up like that. Many of us probably grew up like that, and maybe in our busy lives that's fallen by the wayside. But we've eaten dinner together a lot, and that's been really a blessing. It's a great chance to catch up on the day, to talk to people, and I really don't want to lose that going forward because we've seen how important it is.
Yeah, and for my family, our relationships have been impacted. I think that we just are more aware of how much we really mean to each other. Every Sunday night, our family, my dad actually figured out how to do group duo. And so he gets excited, and we do group duo on Sundays with, my brother and, that lives in Virginia, and South Carolina nephew and a Florida niece. And we just all get together, and it's about an hour. We just sit and talk about, what's going on, and, we goad each other, and just like we're there in front of each other. So that's been really good.
Isn't it interesting? You could have done that without being quarantined, and yet it's this time that has, moved you to do it. And so you can continue that after this. Yeah. Okay, Dawn, well, what about in kingdom activity and your ministry life? And when I say this for us in particular, I'm not talking about what we see as our job, the ministry that we do here, but just in your life. What about that?
So we've been walking alongside of the women of Wellspring in the church here, and their hearts for the graduates who are not going to have graduation and they're missing out on prom and everything else like that, their hearts for them, and their hearts for people who are in the hospital. Right now, somebody is in the hospital, you can't sit beside your loved one, and it's a lonely time. And then, people who are losing their jobs and just are in need, the hearts of the women of Wellspring to want to be doing something for them, and their hearts being burdened for them. We've just been watching it emerge, and they've inspired us and encouraged us. And I just, as a church body, we need to embrace that and just tap into that and just continue that momentum,
Right.
after this.
Yeah, it's been amazing to watch our people just be so intentional about reaching out in ministry.
Yeah.
And so um, we want to follow their lead and get involved
Yeah.
and continue that into the future. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the last question is, what about your spiritual disciplines?
And this is a very important question because as our structure has been different, maybe we've had an opportunity to add to our lives some new things. For those of you who are reading through the Bible, perhaps you've had a longer time to set that apart, to go ahead and catch up if you were behind or read a little bit ahead or whatever that might be. Um, and again, this is a matter of priorities. So we find ourselves with an opportunity to build more spiritual disciplines into our lives, maybe a lot more quiet time, meditation. In fact, I just had a conversation recently with Mike Menges, and he was talking about this, how he thought very intentionally as we entered the time of having to stay home mostly, and what should I do with this time? He was asking himself, and so he and Barb reached out to buy some food from local restaurants to support them, as they're trying to keep their heads afloat. But he thought, what else can I do? So he started walking through his neighborhood and praying for his neighborhood, praying for protection, praying for the families and the houses. I think he said he's only missed a day or two in this whole time of going out there and walking. And he said, sometimes I talk to the Lord, sometimes I listen to what he has to say. And so it's become a meditative and reflective time for him, and also just an intercessory time. And then as he's done that walking, one of the things that the Lord started to show him is how much that he provides. Both Mike and Barb, like many of us, are working less, and so income becomes restricted, and yet they're trying really hard to bless other people, to purchase from local restaurants, to give to the church. So they're trying to stay faithful to all of those kinds of things. And he said, I get to the end of the month and I look and my bills are paid and God has provided and we've been able to bless some other people. And wow, this is amazing. And he said, I was walking in my neighborhood while I was thinking about this. I was praying. I was thanking God for his provision. And I looked down and there was a $1 bill laying in front of me. And it was almost like this moment of, see, I provide for you.
Yeah.
And it was just a reminder that, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the wealth in every mine, it's his. And I know that all of our stories are different in this stretch, and that, some of us are being really, really tested in this financial area, and we may see things in our lives that never return to how they were in that area, or that we have to think very differently about. And we understand that too, but that doesn't mean God hasn't been providing. He does provide for our needs in that quiet time alone, that spiritual discipline of walking, of praying, of being grateful that Mike built into his life, kind of set him up to hear that word from the Lord. And so I think this is a really key aspect for our spiritual journey, Dawn, is as we go back to what we talked about, what you talked about at the beginning as the busyness or the perceived busyness that we have of our lives, to not lose what it is that God has gifted us with during this season, the things that he's provided.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the key for us is to be intentional about not abandoning the gifts that God has given to us and the helpful new things that he gifted us. And you said that, perfectly there.
So keep these things in mind as you wrestle with these 4 questions, saying to God, what do you want me to do with this going forward? How can I take these provisions and carry them into the rest of my life? God bless you guys. We love you.
God bless.